I am so ready for this. It's such a fascinating and, chaotic period of music history.
Today we're going to talk about a new book.
Really? What's the book about?
Well, believe it or not, it's about the Beatles.
Not that big of a surprise, I guess. But it's about that period of the breakup and the decade after that as the Beatles established their solo careers, right?
That's exactly it. We are mapping that first decade of their solo lives, and we're using this really impressive 2-volume study as a guide. It's called The Beatles After the Beatles, The Solo Careers of John, Paul, George, and Ringo, 1967-1980.
And what's so great about it is the whole premise. I mean, the world didn't just lose the greatest band in history.
Yeah.
It gained 4 solo artists who were, desperately trying to figure out who they were outside of that huge shadow.
And the information in this book really acts like a map of that whole very fraught but incredibly creative time.
And the starting point is key. The timeline itself is the first big insight.
Starting in 1967.
Exactly. It completely challenges that clean story that, the solo careers kicked off in 1970 when Paul made the announcement.
It suggests that the whole thing was fraying much, much earlier.
Oh, absolutely. By 67, John was already, well, he was knee-deep in all that experimental stuff with Yoko. Paul was composing the Family Way soundtrack.
Which was so sophisticated.
Right. And George was releasing Wonderwall music. They were already testing the waters, years before the official split.
Okay, so let's unpack how this study is actually put together, because the structure is really smart. It's engineered for different kinds of fans.
It is. It's a 2-volume set, which is great. Volume 1 is, well, it's the narrative.
The story.
The human story, yeah. It traces the whole dissolution starting way back in 66 and going through the end of the 70s. It's all about the biography, the psychology.
And it shows how all the personal stuff, the new marriages, the divorces, the drug issues, the political activism.
All that public drama.
Right. It shows how it all started to interact with their music in a way they just couldn't control anymore. It gives you that real narrative history.
And it covers the really uncomfortable stuff, too. The constant public fighting and the legal battles over Apple Corps. That stuff was a constant drain.
So that's volume 1. But then, if you're the person who needs all the data...
Then you go to volume 2.
Or
the discography.
The reference book.
It's the ultimate scholar's toolbox. It tells the story through the cold, hard facts of the music.
And the level of detail is just, it's incredible.
Well, it is. It covers every album, every single, every weird side project. And it doesn't just say, John recorded Mother in 1970.
No, it tells you the exact dates, the studio, who played on it.
Exactly. It'll name Klaus Voormann on bass, Ringo on drums. It even lists the B-sides in different countries and how they charted.
So volume 1 is the why, and volume 2 is the how and when.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that structure helps frame the core conflict of the decade, which is these 4 totally distinct strategies they use to escape that Beatles shadow.
Okay, let's start with John Lennon. His strategy seems to have been just total demolition. Radical honesty.
An aggressive political activism, right?
Yep.
His whole approach was to tear down that Beatles image and show something raw, something often painful underneath.
It's like musical therapy on record.
Yeah.
You get this swing from the brilliant confessional stuff on Plastic Ono Band.
I mean, Mother is just, it's so stark. It's basically just his voice, piano, and Ringo's drumming.
And then he just flips completely.
To something like Sometime in New York City, which a lot of critics found frankly a bit preachy.
It alienated a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then years later, you get the much softer domestic sound of Double Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
His whole decade was that cycle of destroying and rebuilding.
And speaking of rebuilding, you have Paul McCartney, who took the absolute opposite approach.
Relentless productivity.
And populism, yeah. If John was tearing it all down, Paul was determined to prove he could build something just as big right away with wings.
And his output is just massive. A torrent of music. Some of it brilliant, like Maybe I'm Amazed, and some of it maybe a little disposable.
But almost always catchy.
Yeah.
And he was doing this while critics were just savaging him. They couldn't forgive him for not being a Beatle anymore.
Right. Look at Ram. He played almost everything on that record himself. Linda, contributing vocals. Some great bass lines on that album.
And it got panned. Now it's seen as this groundbreaking solo work. His strategy was basically, I'm just going to keep making music until you have to accept me.
Okay, so then you have George Harrison. His path was more spiritual and selective.
Well, he'd been stockpiling songs for years, right? Songs that were overlooked because, he was competing with Lennon and McCartney.
So All Things Must Pass was just this explosion.
A triple album. It was his announcement to the world that the Quiet Beatle was a serious, formidable songwriter. That album was a spectacular peak for him.
But then his career gets really inconsistent after that.
Frustratingly so. He'd release these amazing classics, but then he'd just vanish for years at a time. And sometimes when he came back, the reception was just brutal.
Like the Dark Horse tour.
Oh, the tour was a disaster. His voice was shot. It just shows he struggled to keep that initial momentum going.
Which brings us to Ringo Starr. His approach was maybe the smartest, in a way.
The most adaptive, for sure. He knew he wasn't going to be seen as the main songwriter. His genius was his personality.
And his address book.
And his ability to get all his famous friends to collaborate, yes. He leaned into being the guy everyone wanted to work with.
And it worked. His early 70s albums were huge hits because he got John, Paul, and George to contribute songs. Nobody else could have pulled that off.
No one. An album like Ringo from '73 was a blockbuster. But, the book also notes that his struggles with alcoholism in the later part of the decade really started to affect his work.
So that brings us to all the little details that make this study so valuable. The weird, obscure projects.
Yes. Let's talk about Paul's playfulness. In '71, he releases an instrumental version of his Ram album.
Oh, the Percy Thrills Thrillington record.
Exactly. He releases it under a fake name. It was like a little psychological test to see if the music could stand on its own without the McCartney name attached.
And then you've got Ringo, completely comfortable in his own lane, narrating Scouts the Mouse.
Right, a children's Christmas book, an album. It just shows how his interests were diverging. He wasn't just a rock drummer anymore.
And George was pouring energy into producing other artists for his label, like Splinter.
He was a mentor, a label head. It was about more than just his own stuff.
But underneath all of this creative work, you have these constant business wars.
Oh, the fighting was nonstop. The central conflict was Alan Klein.
John, George, and Ringo wanted him as manager. Paul didn't.
And Paul ended up suing his own bandmates to dissolve the partnership. The stakes were huge. Control of Apple, control of their song catalog.
And that bitterness spilled right into the music, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Paul takes these little veiled swipes at John on Ram, and John just comes back with How Do You Sleep on Imagine, which is just this brutal, scorched earth attack.
And you also see this huge commercial divergence happen.
They'd have these massive peaks, right? Band on the Run sells millions, All Things Must Pass is a phenomenon.
But at the same time, you had these deep valleys. While Paul's on top of the world with wings, John just disappears.
The 5-year house husband period, he released no new music at all until 1980. The contrast is just staggering.
So, at the end of the day, what does this all mean for the study itself? Where does it fit?
Well, it's not a deep critical analysis like, say, Revolution in the Head. It's a reference work. It prioritizes documentation over a subjective argument.
And that's its biggest strength, really. The
Mhm.
thoroughness is that's what everyone praises. For fans who want the full picture, all the data, it's essential.
Yeah, and it fills a real gap. Most books treat the solo years like an afterthought, an epilogue. This makes the argument that this decade is a full, complex story in itself.
The chronological approach really works, too. You see how they were all still connected.
They were constantly reacting to each other. Paul releases Ram, and John fires right back with Imagine. They were still in a conversation, even if it was a hostile one.
But the limitation is sort of the flip side of that strength.
It is. Because it's so focused on documentation, it doesn't always have that strong narrative voice you get in other biographies. It can feel, purely informational at times.
And we have to talk about the ending. Stopping in 1980 with Lennon's death.
It's a perfect, tragic punctuation mark. It closes the first competitive chapter of their solo lives.
But it's also frustrating, isn't it? Because the story isn't over. It ignores the next 40 years of work from Paul and Ringo, the anthology project.
It leaves you hanging.
So I think the main takeaway for you, the listener, is that to really get the full story of the Beatles, you have to look at this messy, creative, and competitive decade after the split, after Sgt. Pepper.
Absolutely. The information in this book really highlights that this was the decade when they were still actively responding to each other. It makes you think, how different are the solo careers of Paul and Ringo today now that that competitive, often intense tension from John and George is gone?
It's a completely different dynamic.
Yeah.
That fire drove so much of that early work.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Whenever you feel like knowing more about the Beatles, visit us at BeatlesRewind.com. Every day, we do something new there. Song reviews, album reviews, movie reviews, book reviews, documentaries, trivia, all things Beatles. You can find us on the website, BeatlesRewind.com. You can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon Podcasts, practically anywhere you listen. The Beatles, all day, every day. We'll do it again tomorrow.
Always. Until then,
Until next time, when you listen.
your mind conducts its own symphony.